UK vacancies fell again this month. But if you read that headline as proof that the market has got worse, you might have missed the most important signal in that data. And the number's still going down, but it's falling much more slowly. And this week, there were 400 newly announced jobs in one particular corner of the economy. So, is the market starting to find a flaw, or are we simply seeing another temporary pause? Let's get inside the numbers. Hello, I'm Sarah Breyer. I'm a recruitment insider and job search strategist with more than 20 years' experience inside agency, in-house recruitment, and corporate organisations. Each week, I look beyond the job market headlines and explain what is really happening behind the scenes and actually what it means for your job search. This is Recruitment Insider, Inside the Machine. Now, let's start with a number that matters most this week, the latest ONS figures. Put UK vacancies at 712,000 from April to June. That is 7,000 fewer vacancies than during the previous quarter, just a fall of 0.9%. Now, vacancies have fallen again. Sounds like another great piece of bad news, but the direction of travel is only half the story. The other half is the speed. The number of vacancies is still declining, but this was the smallest quarterly fall that we have seen for some time. Unemployment has remained at 4.9% and has eased slightly over the quarter. I'm not going to call that a recovery. It's way too early for that. But what I would describe that as the market is beginning to find something closer to a floor. And that matters for us. A market that's falling more slowly is not the same as a market in free fall. It doesn't mean that job searching has become easy, of course. It means that we need to stop interpreting every negative headline as evidence that conditions are just deteriorating at the same speed. Now, look at the rate of change, not just whether the number has moved up and down. Now, what recruiters are seeing. There is another signal underneath the official vacancy figures. We've got some research from KPMG and the REC report on jobs, and they have found that permanent appointments were still declining, but again, at a slower rate. At the same time, temporary billings have risen at their fastest rate in more than 3 years. And that tells us something important about employer confidence. A lot of organisations still have work that needs to be done. Of course they do, and moving and transformations. They are simply more willing to commit to temporary workers, contractors, and specific projects than to a permanent person in their headcount. For job seekers, what that means is the contract and interim opportunities shouldn't be treated as a consolation prize. In this market right now, they can be the front door. They're going to give you recent experience, new contacts, access to an organisation, and in some cases, a route into a position when employer confidence improves. So, new government. There was another enormous headline this week. Britain has a new Prime Minister. Andy Burnham took over on the 20th of July and within days was speaking to organisations including the CBI, the British Chambers of Commerce, the Federation of Small Businesses and Make UK about creating a new partnership between government and business. But here's the reality check. New Prime Minister doesn't instantly create a new jobs market, sadly. A meeting in Downing Street doesn't create vacancies. A speech doesn't make employers more confident, and of course, political promises don't change what you should do in your job search on a Monday morning. What matters actually is what happens next, where funding's allocated, what projects are approved, and whether employers respond by creating some jobs. One part of the announcement is actually really worth watching. So the government has asked businesses to help get more young people into work. And it said it intends to use public procurement to support British jobs, apprenticeships and skills. Now, this could be really meaningful, particularly for younger job seekers, but only when it turns into actual contracts programs, and hiring numbers. For now, it's a signal to monitor, not a reason to change your strategy. The more immediate evidence came from two named and funded investments. An organisation called Alfor Aviation has announced a £50 million aircraft conversion headquarters at Teesside Airport, and that's expected to create 250 permanent jobs. Fantastic for that area. In Sheffield, Special Melted Products is developing Project Vulcan, which is expected to create another 150 skilled roles in advanced manufacturing. Fantastic. There's 400 jobs connected to identifiable projects, funding, and locations. And this is the second week running that some of the clearest hiring signals have happened in aerospace and advanced manufacturing. And this is where I want you to change the question that you're asking. Instead of just asking who's hiring, ask yourself and look around who has received investment, who has won a major contract, who is opening a new site, which projects now have money and delivery dates attached to them. Vacancies tell you who's recruiting today. Investment announcements can tell you who might need people next. This is where this hidden jobs market comes in, right? If you work in engineering, manufacturing, operations, project delivery, supply chain, technology, finance, HR, or another supporting function, don't assume that these announcements are only relevant to people who are building aircraft components. A funded project creates an entire hiring ecosystem around it. It includes program management, procurement, commercial roles, compliance, recruitment, finance, admin, leadership, not just those technical positions. You've got to have people taking care of those. There was one more unusual signal this week. No major redundancy story broke cover. Touch wood. After several weeks of announcements involving huge names, outsourced workforces and university restructuring this week was noticeably quieter. Now, it doesn't mean to say that redundancies have stopped. Large announcements often find themselves around financial results, restructuring timetables, and consultation periods. And one quiet week isn't enough to call it a trend, but it's still worth noticing. If you only consume the loudest jobs market headlines, you can come away from that believing that every employer and every industry is cutting at the same time and at the same rate. They're not. The market's uneven. Some organisations are reducing headcount, some are avoiding permanent recruitment, some are increasing their use of a temporary workforce, and others are investing millions in new facilities and they're creating jobs. All of these things can be true at once. So, what to do this week? What should you do differently as a result of this week's intelligence? First, stop treating every fall in vacancies as evidence that the market's collapsing. Look at the speed and the long-term patterns. Second, think about contract, temporary, and interim opportunities in your search. That is where employers are currently more willing to commit. Third, have a look at investment announcements, major contracts, new sites, and funded projects in your sector. Don't wait until all those vacancies are on a job board. And keep an eye on aerospace and advanced manufacturing. 2 weeks of evidence doesn't make it relevant to everybody, but it's now a pattern that's worth watching. So my assessment this week is simple. The jobs market hasn't recovered, but there are signs that the decline might be slowing down, which is great news. And the opportunities that do exist are becoming more concentrated. Your job here is not to panic at every single headline. It's to identify where the confidence, funding, and activity are moving and position yourself ahead of those vacancies. If you want me to do this analysis for you every week, you can subscribe to this channel, to Recruitment Insider, and let me know in the comments, are you seeing more movement in permanent roles, contract work, or neither? I'll see you next week in the next briefing.